Good morning, everyone. Today is the 30th of October, 2018. I'm Roy Potter. Welcome to the Potter Expositor. Wow. As I often start these things out, I realize that there's just there's way too much going on. And like I've said several times, I want to get away from the political stuff a little bit more than I have, as evidenced by the last video. But by the same token, when important things happen, I suppose I just need to get up here and at least talk about it for whatever it's worth. And I try to cover it from a perspective that you don't get in the media, the mainstream media. And a lot of us here on YouTube do try to do that. I want to give a shout out to High Impact Vlogs again for his excellent information that he puts out, keeping us up to date on what's happening, and I just have a lot of respect for him, so I wanted to give him a shout out this morning. I've titled this video, "Did the Revolution Really Free Us from the British?" for a lot of reasons. We have a special guest coming on today. I've had her on before. Her name's Vicky Davis. Her website is thetechnocratictyranny.com, and the information is in the description box below. It's... AIM has covered this before. If you know who AIM is or what AIM is, it's the American Intelligence Media. They've done a really good job with this, and a lot of people don't like their spiritual outlook and then try to cause some problems with that. And there have been some other issues, but by and large, I have a lot of respect for the American Intelligence Media. And then, of course, there's somebody like Vicky who comes along and basically corroborates much of that information, which she has done. And so we're going to talk about some of the influences on the U.S. government today. What happened was that she saw my video on the one where I said, did Five Eyes have have a part in the Las Vegas shooting? And my look at that now is nearly 100% sure that they did. And the links between Mary Lou Danley, who was supposedly the girlfriend of the supposed shooter. We have that information on her, and we also about Brian Hodges, the Australian citizen, and these two people actually both worked in the same casino in Australia. And it's sure looking like with everything else, and I talked about that in that video, so I don't want to repeat it here to any great extent. But these ties are not coincidences. Now, I wanted to bring up another thing along that same line. It came out yesterday. Get this. We all know who Stormy Daniels is, right? Stormy Daniels and Cesar Sayoc, I hope I'm saying his name right, they both worked in the same strip club. Well, imagine that. You see all these coincidences, and of course that's all down near, that area of Florida where we keep having these problems like the Parkland shooting, et cetera, et cetera. Interesting. So these people are not strangers, and they're all doing these things for the radical left is really what they're doing. Sayoc, of course, has been a Democrat. He was not a Trump follower. Everything there was obviously a setup. There are no scruples in the liberal left, the radical left anymore, none whatsoever. And it's unfortunate that the disagreement on whether government should be a provider of more services or whether it should be an individual struggle, that's what the argument used to be. And it isn't that any longer. It's about the difference between liberty and slavery. I'm not saying that the Republicans by any means have it right when it comes to the point of liberty, but by the same token, the Democrats don't seem to have any concept, and the liberal left, radical left, leftist Marxists don't believe you should have any personal freedom unless it involves, wanting to be a transgender or that kind of thing, to get your mind off what the real freedoms are, what the real liberties are. With that little introduction, we have some serious problems, obviously. And one of the statements that we've heard in the past is, if you want to know who rules over you, just ask who you cannot criticize. And in that regard, I want to play a clip which has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about today. This is about a 2.5 to 3 minute clip. Please watch this.
They can't come, they cannot come in the way they want to come in. Doesn't work that way. We don't have borders, we don't have a country, and we have the greatest country on earth, okay? Republicans know that the rule of law is essential to national sovereignty.
President Trump on the migrant caravan at his rally last night in Wisconsin. My next guest just returned from Guatemala, where he spent 4 days on the ground witnessing the caravan just north of the Honduran border. Joining us tonight, Chris Farrell, Director of Investigations for Judicial Watch. Chris, good to have you with us. I know that this caravan was a subject of considerable interest for you, for Judicial Watch, and certainly for the American people. Give us your first, and I'm going to, because we have limited time, ask you to be as succinct as possible, your thoughts on what you witnessed and what you saw and heard.
It's an overwhelmingly male caravan of mid-teens to mid-40s. I'd say the women and children are a super minority. There are certainly criminal elements rolled into the caravan. There were children that were recovered from a human smuggling operation today. The Guatemalans are trying to hold them back and turn them back, but it's a very grave situation.
Leftist groups reported to be the organizers, playing instrumental roles and financial roles. Tell us what you can.
Sure. Look, this is a criminal involvement on the part of these leftist groups. It's a highly organized, very elaborate, sophisticated operation. I have that from the highest levels of the Guatemalan government. They're investigating those groups criminally, and I strongly urge President Trump and Attorney General Sessions to do the same here. A lot of these folks also have affiliates who are getting money from the Soros-occupied State Department, and that is a very great concern. You want to start cutting money there.
Do you know anything about what we're seeing in that's reports and pictures of USAID packages, bags containing what we know not, but obviously distributed by USAID? What is behind that?
I don't have a clear answer off the top of my head. I can just tell you that there's all sorts of programs that these groups are affiliated with that we spend taxpayer money on. It needs to be cut off now.
And where are we headed? We have another caravan of 1,000 or more people forming up in Honduras, ready to make the same trek through Guatemala to into Mexico with the plan of getting to our southern border. Your thoughts about this and what we can expect?
It's really an intermittent river of humanity. It's not a caravan in the sense of a discrete group. And I also I don't have firm evidence yet, but my intelligence, my indicators look for something coming out of El Salvador in the next week.
And the president has ordered at least 800 troops, primarily in mission, to the southern border. What's it going to take what appears to be now 14,000 migrants in this caravan being shuttled by the Mexican government right into our border?
If they get to the border and they make an asylum claim, remember, 98% get through. Something fundamental's got to change here.
All right. Chris Farrell, good to have you back. Thanks.
Thanks, Lou. Sure. Look, this is a criminal involvement on the part of these leftist groups. It's a highly organized, very elaborate, sophisticated operation. I have that from the highest levels of the Guatemalan government. They're investigating those groups criminally, and I strongly urge President Trump and Attorney General Sessions to do the same here. A lot of these folks also have affiliates who are getting money from the Soros-occupied State Department, and that is a very great concern. You want to start cutting money there.
Yes, Fox banned Chris Farrell for what he said about Soros. Isn't that interesting? But people aren't banned for saying the things that they say about President Trump. Is it just because of anti-Semitism? Is that what they're saying? Well, Soros is one of the most anti-Semitic people on the face of the earth, if you really want to look at it. And there's something about Soros I can't quite put my finger on. His opposition to Israel is very telling. It's almost as if he's in opposition to the Rothschilds, which at that level of power grabbing could be the case. I'm not saying that makes him a good guy, because the devil's a devil. But we've got to look into this a little bit more. But you see what my point is. Chris Farrell gets banned for mentioning something that's true. And that's how the radical left works. You say something about them or about their agenda, and they want to shut you up. The most favored way of doing that is either by putting you in an insane asylum or killing you. But, of course, the social media and the news media, the CIA-controlled mainstream media is basically shutting down anyone who brings out these things that are going on, and particularly the individuals involved. Fox banning Chris Farrell for mentioning the truth about Soros. So who can you not criticize? Well, obviously Soros you can't. Rothschilds are never brought up. Islam you can't criticize. Interesting. You can't criticize Hillary Clinton. Nor, here's my caller, or the guest for today. So you get my point. Hold on just a minute. There you are. How are you this morning?
Hi, fine, thank you.
Well, good. I'm going to put you on in just a minute. Give me about 2 more minutes to get this intro, and we'll be right at it, okay? And don't forget to speak up, because you'll have to put the phone up to the mic, all righty? Okay, I'll be right back with you. So, Clinton's another one that we can't criticize, and of course Obama. And yet these are the people that are running this shadow government. They're enemies. They really are enemies. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but the Democratic Party has allowed itself to no longer be the party of an opposing ideology about government services, about how much government should be involved as far as helping people. What it's become is a tyranny. It has become truly a Marxist, Leninist, communist, authoritarian left, and we have to watch out what's going on. They're very dangerous at this point. It's like I said, whether there's a red wave in the election or whether there's a blue wave, it's not going to matter. It's going to be bad either way, so you got to be ready. I did want to bring up something that I saw yesterday in the news. I thought it was kind of interesting. If you've been watching it all, if you know the actor James Cromwell, he's played in a lot of movies. He's been a political activist for a long time. He was like the detective who was actually doing all the terrible things in L.A. Confidential, if you ever saw that movie with Russell Crowe and that group. Anyway, Cromwell came out and said this, and a lot worse. He said a lot worse, but this, you can go look him up. There will be a revolution, blood in the streets, unless Trump is stopped. That's a quote from him, and we're seeing that everywhere. Yet if we criticize the left's agenda, they silence us. They tell us how bad we are. They try to link us in with all of these. I'm not saying they're all false flags and that they didn't happen, but the information is skewed in a lot of ways. For instance, on this Cesar Sayoc guy, if he was ever a Trump supporter, well, it's just an outright lie. It's obviously a setup. And we could talk about the shooting that we had over the weekend there at the synagogue too, and about some things, the way they're pressing that. And it's all to keep people from talking, to shut down their free speech, because communication is how we find out what the truth is, not by bullets. But if they're shooting the bullets, it's okay. Okay? So I don't want to get onto the shooting at the synagogue. That's really not my issue today. My issue is the influences that we as an American constitutional republic, what we want to be, how we are being attacked by our enemies. And some of those enemies are going to surprise people. If you've listened to the American intelligence media, you'll know some of this already, or if you've studied history at all. But my guest, Vicky Davis, whose website is thetechnocratictyranny.com, it's in the description box below, is going to talk to us about the influences, especially from the British Commonwealth today. And again, she's known about it for a long time, but my video last week on if Five Eyes had something to do with the Las Vegas massacre is why she and I talked about this subject, and I thought it was of such importance that I wanted to bring it up. So without any further ado, let me introduce Vicky Davis again. She doesn't like me to call her an investigative journalist, but she's one of the finest I know. Anyway, I'll let her take it from there. We're going to talk about a couple of things. Basically, the British Commonwealth, how it has its powers in us even today, its influences with, of course, the whole Five Eyes network, which is really all the British Commonwealth with the exception of the United States, is what we think. But then when you start looking at it, you find out that really Britain is still, especially the City of London, is still trying to control us, and we never really did shake loose from that, especially when we brought them back in with the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. There was an article that she has on her website from the Technocratic Tyranny that she wrote. It's talking about an article that was written for the Brookings Institute by a Daniel A. Byman, and it's talking about terrorism. And this guy is so full of crap. You know, I mean, he's obviously not a terrorism expert, but he pretends like he is, and he's saying all this crap about the government's definitions of terrorism. He knows nothing at all. What it is, it's a propaganda hit piece against anybody who goes against the leftist agenda. That's really what it is. But I don't know that she addresses that in her part of that, but she does quote the article. And then there's another one that has to do with that she does write on that website of hers. It's called a new narrative for communism, and I think she's going to talk about this quite a bit today. And it's about an organization called More in Common, which is it's supposed to help people find their these different groups, these different what they call tribes, to find common ground. Well, what it really is, after I looked at it, is a way to shut down dissent against the leftist agenda again. That's exactly what it is. And so without any further ado, other than to say this, she raised a question in this article where she says, I'm beginning to wonder when I look at these things if these groups out of Britain aren't the ones that are even behind such movements as the Sovereign Citizen Movement and Antifa, controlling both sides of the narrative, right? Full spectrum dominance. So with that, let's get Vicky on here. Vicky, how are you?
Hi, Roy. Boy, I hope I can live up to all of that in that intro.
Well, the only reason why I gave it is because you wrote about it. And then, of course, I always analyze these things. So you've got the floor. Take it from there, and we'll just listen.
Okay. All right. Well, first, I'd like to say that everything that's going on in our country today is story time. And I like to organize things in my mind in such a way that I can understand them in a simplified way. So what I would say is that the left is working on emotion and the right is working on logic with selected facts. They're very careful about their sources, and they're very careful about facts that they give. But essentially, that's the breakdown. And when these events occur, it's story time. And from the beginning of time, the elites in all the societies have used stories to communicate with the people. Because the people, I assume, the people are just busy living their lives, and they respond to stories that don't require a lot of analysis. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so when events occur, like the most recent events, what I do is I try to look for the narrative. Everybody knows that Rahm Emanuel said there's no such thing as a problem, there are only opportunities. Well, Rahm Emanuel didn't invent that. In the business that I was in the IT business, they were saying that as far back as even before I became a programmer. So it's a well-known thing, it's part of change management. When there's a problem, it's an opportunity to solve a problem. So,
I think he also didn't he also say how did he put it? Don't waste an opportunity, something like, I forget exactly how he put it, but in other words, take advantage of a situation so that you can push your own agenda. Let no problem go to waste. I guess was something he said, something like that.
Yeah, let no crisis go to waste.
That's it. Thank you. Yes.
Which is essentially saying the same thing. There aren't problems, there are only opportunities. And so when events happen, okay, now when at story time it used to be that, you know, everybody gather around the campfire, or the allegory of the cave is really good for understanding this. But in today's environment, the internet is our gathering around the campfire. So when an event happens, what I'm looking for, I'm not watching the event as much as I'm watching for the narrative that follows. And how that connects into the whole big agenda of everything else that's going on, which is really kind of a different way of looking at things. And when I was watching the coverage of this shooting at the synagogue, when I heard a woman being interviewed talk about HIAS, H-I-A-S, I knew it was going to be, what they were going to try to do is conflate refugee resettlement with the Holocaust and with the migrant caravan. And once you throw up that Jewish shield, you know, Holocaust victims, you can't talk about anything.
Like Chris Farrell was cut off when he brought up Soros.
Right, exactly.
Let me interject here because I want to make this perfectly clear. Okay, I have no problem with allowing Israel to exist. Okay, it's a nation state. I have no problem with that. The way it was founded and how it happened is of question, but you know those are times past now. I don't have a problem with Jews. I don't have a problem with the Jewish people. I know their history extremely well. It's not as they say it is there for a lot of them, but I let that go, okay, even though I know an awful lot about it. However, what I do have a problem with, and I've said this before, and apparently some people were calling me anti-Semitic. I don't know if they've ever seen me, Vicky, in my tallit and you know, doing some of the rituals I do, which are Israelite, not just Jewish, but the Jews, the Judahites were part of the larger tribe or the larger nation of Israel, of course, not the nation state we're talking about today. But I do some of those things. But I did bring up the thing about the Mossad being not part of Five Eyes, but very likely a part of 9/11 and part of this thing that happened in Las Vegas along with Saudi intelligence. And a lot of people got upset, again, trying to equate that with being anti-Semitic. Look, folks, just so everybody's clear, okay? I'm critical of the Mossad, which is supposed to work for the state of Israel, just like I'm critical of the CIA, which is supposedly working for the United States. They aren't working for their countries, okay? They are a power, a government unto themselves. The Five Eyes is a good example of that, how they tried to work against Trump. They're against the constitutional republic of the United States, all of them, because they want to set up a world technocratic tyranny, which is exactly what Vicky's talking about. So I just wanted to clear that up, Vicky, because every time you bring up Israel or Jews, people think you automatically are anti-Semitic. And I want them to understand that we've got a problem with the intelligence community of Israel just as badly as we have a problem with the intelligence community of the United States and Britain, etc.
Yeah, well, the people that do that are very, very well trained. It's just like Pavlov's dog. You know, you mention Jew or Jewish or anything, immediately they think anti-Semitism. On the Republican side, as soon as you mention the word, I guess you could call it dog whistle politics, you mention abortion, and all the people on the right start barking, bark, bark, bark. And so they're very, very well trained. Now, as for me, I don't care about religion at all, period. Any religion. I don't care whether it's Catholic or Jewish or, I do care about Islam because Islam is a political system. But I'm just not into that. So I don't have any anti-Semitism because I don't care. But I do care about it being used to shut down conversations or dialogues. That I care about. But, okay, now how this relates. HIAS is a refugee resettlement organization. They bring in refugees. And just in case you think that refugee resettlement has anything to do with humanitarianism, forget about that. We're talking about big business, a lot of money. Okay? And the use of mass movements of people who are what you would say foreign to a territory, that's a tactic. It's a tactic of conquer. And it's not just HIAS that's doing it. There is the Anglican Communion, which is a UN NGO. There is Episcopal Migration Ministries. There is Catholic Services. They're doing it. Every religion that you can name is doing it. And all of that started in 1989 with George Herbert Walker Bush's faith-based initiatives. And basically it was the beginning of privatization of social services. And how that relates to the bigger agenda, the bigger New World Order agenda is to eliminate nation states and have cities, the population centers, become city-states like Rome. Okay, and that's where the British Empire comes into play. Because the British Empire was a maritime empire, and it was built on ports. The British would capture ports, but they didn't do it militarily if they didn't have to. What they did basically was to corrupt the public officials, and they worked through the public officials so that the people in the country would see their own people changing things in their country, but it was really the British Empire in the background. The British Empire became the British Commonwealth, all under one system of governance brought to them by the British. And then when India declared their independence, they renamed the Commonwealth to be the Commonwealth of Nations.
Would you say that again so that people get that? I want them to hear that one more time, Vicky, please. Thank you. The British Commonwealth becoming the Commonwealth of Nations. Please say that one more time.
Yeah. Well, they went from the British Empire, and it was called the British Empire. That was changed to the British Commonwealth, and from the British Commonwealth, it became the Commonwealth of Nations.
And what year are we talking about? Do you remember that?
I think that was 1949.
Okay.
But I'm not. But I can't swear to it.
Right, but it was around the same time the United Nations was being formed.
Yes, yes, it was. And as I understand it, the British, the Commonwealth countries, of which there are a lot of them, they vote as a bloc in the UN. And I'm not sure what year this happened, but at some point in time, on the economic and social side of the UN, they started making the systems that they were designing and promoting, they made it sort of a democratic process. But this whole system of NGOs, non-governmental people, of course, that derives out of the United Nations system, which is, of course, a big part of it, is the Commonwealth. Okay. With the idea, of course, being ultimately a one-world system of governance.
Isn't it interesting that it's actually coming from the Anglo-American side? This whole push for a new world order is coming from the Anglo-Americans. I think, for me, that's extremely important. And of course, Britain is the centerpiece in this thing, especially the City of London and Westminster Abbey.
Absolutely. Yeah, before World War II, FDR and Winston Churchill met out in the ocean somewhere, I forget where, but they signed something called the Atlantic Charter. And that was the first step towards creating the United Nations.
And NATO. That's where NATO came from too, correct?
Yeah, but NATO was after World War II.
Right, very long after.
Uh-huh. But, of course, all during World War II, the U.S. and Britain were like the same team in terms of communications and strategic planning and all of that. After World War II, that's when the real Iron Curtain that was put up was the Iron Curtain between the American people and our government, our real government. That's when the national security state was built. And they've been operating behind that Iron Curtain for a very long time. And I don't think it really wasn't until we got the internet that we began to, I don't know what you would say, drill holes through that Iron Curtain.
Yeah, that's the same thing in the scripture. And I know you don't like religious things, but I have to put this in here once in a while. They built that thing for their control, and then they gave us access to it. And it goes back to that saying, with you shall fall into the pit that you dug for others. Because that really has exposed them. It's helped us to expose what they're up to if people would just have the courage to open their eyes and ears.
That's a perfect way to describe it. Because everything you need to know is out there. All this history is out there. I have to say, when I started this project, the only history I knew really came from Hollywood, from the movies, from the wartime movies. And they were telling stories. They weren't telling the real truth, the important stuff, but they were telling stories to the people. And, who knew? If you don't know these things, if you aren't exposed to the way that people are manipulated, and the British are master manipulators of people. No matter what else you can say about them, they are absolutely brilliant at the manipulation of people. Otherwise, they couldn't have built the British Empire.
Well, you were mentioning that movies and entertainment have been used by the intelligence communities, particularly the CIA, really all along. Especially the Department of Defense. Along with the intelligence community pushing pro-war things, to try to get people behind that. But then, it was still technically wrong, even though they did it even before that, to lie to the American people, to propagandize us with our own institutions that we fund for our protection. So they had the Smith-Mundt Act, of course, that came in to prevent the government from lying to us. And then, of course, with the HR, well, I forget the number right now, but basically it repealed the Smith-Mundt Act, and that was done by Congress. So there you have the very people that we hired to protect us against this kind of thing, actually using our resources to lie to us. And, that is unbelievable to me. But again, where did they learn it? Probably the British, correct?
Yeah. I understand why they did that, because the media are the storyteller, and the media have been controlling the political environment in the United States absolutely forever.
And it's my point again that they're part of they're actually an extension, as is the social media as are the social media platforms now, an extension of the intelligence community, especially the CIA.
Oh, absolutely. And what happens when any group of people forms, there will be an insurgent that comes into the group, because from a political standpoint, they have to control the narrative. It's all about the narrative. And so what they've done is they've lost control of the narrative. And so the more people in the alternative media that speak up and gain attention, the less attention is focused on the mainstream media, the more radically stupid they get. I was watching coverage yesterday of CNN. Man, I quit watching CNN a long time ago when they kicked Lou Dobbs off. That was about in 2006 or 2007, because Lou Dobbs was focused on the immigration problem, because our southern border was porous at that time and we were being invaded. And our government wasn't doing anything about it. And so Lou Dobbs started doing the coverage, not only on the migration of people from Mexico to take blue-collar jobs, but also on the importation of people from India to take white-collar jobs, IT jobs, the jobs of the future, so to speak. And so he started focusing on it, and CNN, he was forced out of CNN.
Now that's what they do, And if I can interject there, I saw, I knew it was coming, but it's in the news now, especially on Drudge Report, that Trump is going to basically stop birthright citizenship. In other words, the anchor baby situation, which I find laudatory, because the real problem with our immigration, despite the fact that the Dems and the liberal Marxists and those who are enemies of our constitutional republic are trying to bring these people here to fundamentally transform our nation, the nation we want it to be, outside of our control. They want to take that from us. The real issue with these people coming here are the free social welfare programs that they have, and so if even better than a wall. I mean, I'm not saying that we don't need a barrier at the border, but you need to have eyes on a barrier whenever you have it. My documentary, Borders, Mexican Drug War or Insurgency, that I did in 2011 explains that. But more than even the barrier, if we just stop allowing people to steal from us when they come here. I mean, there are immigrants that make more a month than somebody who's an American citizen that's worked their whole life and then gotten on Social Security. I mean, it's ludicrous what's happened. So the real issue in my estimation to combat this is what Trump just did. And that's just the first step, to stop these social welfare giveaway programs that are so attractive to these other folks in these other countries anyway. And I'm not trying to put off the fact that America in the past hasn't been responsible for a lot of terrible things. I know that, but the past is the past. That was then, this is now, and we need to have a new look. Vicky, I'd like to kind of move real quick into the situation with how. Well, I guess more than that, why, if it's true, and I'm just going to throw this out there to you because I think it's still around the same time period last year where this happened, with my video on Las Vegas and the Five Eyes. I find it fascinating that with all the problems that we've had with, as you've pointed out, unveiling the true intentions of the British Commonwealth and the Commonwealth of Nations and all of that, and how it's being run out of Britain, and they still consider us a colony, essentially, at least an arm of that power. We talked about the situation in Vegas and how I linked in the whole thing with the Five Eyes being involved because of the obvious connection of Mary Lou Danley and Brian Hodge. So with that, I think it illuminates the danger that the American people are in, that this isn't just an ideological disagreement, that this is actual warfare being levied against us by those that we have considered our allies, and we've been misled. And I'd like you to, if you don't mind, with the knowledge that you have and this information on your website that you provided, would you address that and let me know and let our audience know if I'm anywhere near right on that and the consequences of it if I am?
Well, yeah, I do believe you are right. That's according to my analysis. Okay, now if we go back to what I was talking about with the British Empire, the British Empire was built around ports. Well, in 1990, when George Herbert Walker Bush started us down this New World Order path, one of the earliest things that they did was to redefine our transportation system and to design it around the concept of ports, with ports being inland, with your local airport being able to be defined as a port for international commerce. So it's not just the seaports, it's the airports, and it's the ports for trucking, for commerce. An intermodal commerce zone, which is what they called it, but essentially it really is a port under the GATT system or maritime law, whichever law you want to look at, but specifically, if you want to see it, it's in the Generalized Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, the original one that was done in 1947. It called for free movement of goods for transit. In 1995, when they voted to create the World Trade Organization, they included services. Okay, so going back to Los Angeles, that the location where that occurred, right next to the airport, that is a port zone.
So basically we're losing sovereignty over those areas, and then to complete the loss of that sovereignty, they're going to things like sustainability development and those types of things to actually link it all together.
Yeah. Well, and all of that is really a conversion, putting us under the international system of law. If you control a person's environment, you control them.
Right.
A person is in an environment, right? Totally controlled. Well, the system, the environmental protection system that they've established, it's like an open-air zoo for people. You know, they define where you can go, where you can't go. They're closing roads. They're doing all kinds of things, controlling our environment.
Yeah,
Okay,
claiming
now,
that they're trying to protect the environment. It's just an excuse. We really saw that play out to its most dangerous point. Fortunately, it didn't go any further. But at Bundy Ranch, that was really what that was about. Because the tortoise was never in danger. The BLM had actually euthanized thousands of them. It was really this land grab thing you were talking about. And I have to point out, of course, that it was for the benefit of the likes of Harry Reid, Hillary Clinton, and now, as we learn, the British Commonwealth as well.
mm. Well, if you think about it, you know, anybody that is outside of a city-state, and the city-states would be San Francisco and the Bay Area, it would be Chicago, Detroit, New York City. Those, under the global system, they would be the centers of power. So anybody that's outside of a city-state, if they move to a global system, they're kind of out of the control zone, if you will.
Well, now that's an interesting point because, as we know, there's a big call now to get rid of the Electoral College, which is to protect the rural areas against the tyranny of the urban areas. So isn't that interesting that they're actually attacking the one thing that we have to protect us against this?
Yeah. Well, another thing that's happening that probably most people haven't noticed yet is that the Congress is trying yet again. They've tried this several times, and I don't know what holds them back. But they are trying to break up the Ninth Circuit Court. The Ninth Circuit Court controls about 20% of the U.S. population.
Right.
That's too many people in that one district. And so the Congress is going to try again to break it up. And I really don't understand why they can't just do it, because they have the power to do it.
Oh, it's payoffs again, Vicky, of course, you know. Soros is probably in on that one too, you know, trying to stop it, I mean. You know, his name continually pops up on these types of situations. Why he isn't considered an enemy of the state? And again, I have a lot of questions about his opposition to the Rothschilds. There's really something there I haven't quite got a hold of in my mind yet. But the fact that he does the things he does, I'm very disappointed that of all the things that Trump could do, why he hasn't. I mean, if they're going to go after, you know. We keep hearing, and this might be a cover story, I don't know. They keep talking about going after Assange. Well, why isn't the Delta Force, you know, collaring Soros and his crowd? You know, these things just boggle my mind, and I have no patience for it. So before we go any further, maybe we better do this because I don't want to lose anybody that might forget. One of the purposes of us doing this today is because Vicky has a treasure lode of analysis and investigation information, of articles, of evidence, and things like that she's done an incredible job on. When you listen to her, you got to read her articles because her articles are so in depth and so clear and tell you exactly what's happening. So one of the things that we're doing today is we're looking for a younger showing my age here, Vicky. We're looking for a younger YouTube creator, commenter, whatever, someone who has their you know, that's doing quite well. I have a few in mind, but I'm going to leave it open at this point rather than contacting them directly now. We would like to find someone who appeals to the younger crowd, because that's really where the war is right now. They need to be awakened and informed about what the real issues are. And Vicky could really use some help from someone who has a younger audience and yet a large audience. So if there's anyone out there that's listening, in the description box below, I have Vicky's website. It's called thetechnocratictyranny.com. And if you go to that website and you look on the front page left panel, you will see her contact information. And
excuse me, Roy.
Yeah,
Roy, you got that? It's on my old website. On the front page, left panel.
Oh, okay. So the technocratic tyranny. Let's start there so we don't confuse people. I'm sorry. So, well, maybe you can just explain it. How can they get a hold of you? And you can talk about both of those. And I guess I don't have that other one up on there, but go ahead. How do we get a hold of you?
Okay. My email address is on both websites. One of them on the new website, the Technocratic Tyranny. It's in the About page. On the old website, it's on the front page on the left-hand panel.
Okay, what's the old website's name? I'm sorry, I forgot again.
Channelingreality.com.
That's right. So there are two of those. Well, I don't have that one in the description box, but the one in the description box, they can go to the About page and find your email address and contact you about possibly helping you to get your information out to a larger, younger audience.
Actually, what I'm looking more for is somebody that I can help. Because when these narratives come up, when these events happen, it's the narrative that is the thing that should be focused on, not whether it was a real event or whether it was a fake event. It doesn't matter whether it was real or fake. It's an event, and it's going to be used for a narrative, for
right.
Story time. And if you can see that and get first out there with the narrative, then that strategically puts you way ahead of the crowd. And it's kind of like cutting them off at the pass. To use an old Western tactic.
No, that's
cut
good.
them off at the pass.
Sure, and that's good. I'm glad you explained that a little better than I did. I saw the Still report. I don't know if you ever watch Bill Still. I find him really, really good. And he put a clip up last night, or maybe it was this morning, showing the CNN people, like you say, they get out in this narrative, and it really isn't about as you said, it really isn't about the incident. It's about getting their agenda out there in front of the people. So yeah, absolutely, you're absolutely right. So hopefully, I'll put that another way. You will be able to help another YouTube provider creator with the information that you have. But I think it'll be synergistic. It'll also give you another avenue to get your information out, which I find, and I always have, Vicky, to be priceless and really absolutely important to understanding what we need to do to secure our liberties once again. And it's not going to be easy. These people have been throwing up camouflage for 60 years plus, and we really don't realize how far down the road of tyranny and authoritarianism we have gone. And as you know, Vicky, I'm not sure that the American people have the will to get it back. And it worries me every day. The Trump movement is great. He's keeping it simple. And I think that's been wise on his part, although I wish he would just go ahead and spill the beans on some of our supposed allies and what's happened in Vegas and how they went after him for our shadow government, and how all that ties into the British and the Five Eyes system and all of that, which is really the Anglo-American attempt to take over the world. And the Russians do have a reason to be afraid. I'm afraid they do. It's unfortunate, yeah. But at any rate,
because I'm afraid. If I'm afraid, then they certainly have a reason to be afraid.
yeah. Well,
Okay,
these.
but let me
Go ahead. Go ahead.
let me continue with Las Vegas and Five Eyes and how that fits into
Oh, okay.
the port structure. Okay, now if you look up Presidential Decision Directive 28 that was signed by Bill Clinton, you'll see in there that that was about the reinvention of government. And he specifically said the reinvention of government along regional lines. Okay, regional lines. That means that they're working at cross-jurisdictional boundaries. And the whole New World Order system is about breaking down existing jurisdictional boundaries. When they defined the port system as part of our transportation system, with Las Vegas being a port, and the idea of the megacities, the city-states, replacing the nation-state with a system of city-states, that is regionalization. The communications system, the fusion center systems, are regional systems. Okay, so they're building the police state on a regional basis across jurisdictional boundaries. Okay, so if you know how law works, you have your laws that apply within your county. You've got your county laws. You have your city code that regulates your activities in the city. And then you have your state code that regulates, what happens in the state. Well, when you're working regionally, you're working above those land-based, geographically defined boundaries. So the strategy is cross-jurisdictional. And of course, we're not aware of these regional agreements. I call it treason by contract.
Wow. For sure.
Mm-hmm. But so they're working across jurisdictional boundaries, and that there are no laws cross-jurisdictionally within the state. They all come from the Fed. And I consider that our federal government really has been captured. It was captured by the tech industry. And the tech industry has been defining government policy ever since Bill Clinton got into office. And that's when the whole reinvention of government, well, it actually started under Reagan, but I mean, those were the preliminary steps. And during the preliminary steps, you don't see any changes. It wasn't until Bill Clinton came into office that we began to see changes in the way that the government was functioning. And so the communications system across regional boundaries includes the NSA, which has had an agreement with the British since before World War II. Okay, so they have been the communications. They weren't called the NSA at that point. But,
right.
They have been working. I think it was called Signals Intelligence.
Yes.
Actually, now that I'm thinking about it. So they have been working with the British, and the Five Eyes countries are all Commonwealth countries. It's Britain, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and the United States. Okay, so they are the ones that are working across the Atlantic with a communications infrastructure, and that was, of course, where the origin of the New World Order, the world governing system, originated. So you know, strategically, once you see how all this is working and how they are how these events play into what the ultimate strategy is, then you can kind of jump ahead on the narrative, and you can take their narrative and
basically take control. Yeah, take control from them.
Yes.
Is
exactly.
that our only answer? I guess we probably ought to ask what we can do to reverse what's happened. In any event, it's not going to be easy, and I do believe Trump is trying to do that. At least I hope that's the case. My when I look at what he's going through and everything, I don't consider it all drama or theater. I really honestly think that he's in danger and that he's trying to do the right thing. But what do you think would be the most effective thing that we could do to reverse this whole process?
Communications, because this is a war that's being fought on civilian turf. And if you look at the power differential between our government and us, it's no contest.
Right.
We cannot win this as a power struggle between the government and between us. We have to regain control of our government.
And that's exactly what Trump said. He wanted to give it back to the American people and not keep it in D.C. So that sounds like to me you're on the same page with him.
Yes. And we have to get it away from the tech industry. Last night there was on Frontline, there was a program about Facebook. And about the evolution of Facebook and how they actually caused a revolution in Saudi Arabia, the Arab Spring or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the power of a communications system like that. And that's what we're looking at. And if people understand that, and how dangerous Facebook is, because of the narratives that bad people can formulate to lead people off in the wrong direction.
And to get rid of those, as they are now with the censorship, get rid of those that counter their narrative, be it the truth or not. Now, I would say that the truth is what they're trying to shut up. But, yeah, so it's a two-pronged approach. One, they have control of that, and two, they shut down others who counter their agenda.
Right. So... And we know that they're shutting down conservative voices. So we need everybody to get out there and don't just observe what's going on. Mm-hmm. Get into the fray. We need you. We need you out there. But we need you to be telling the truth. Tell the whole truth. And get out there, jump ahead of their narrative and say, here's what is really going on here. Okay, so what I said when I posted that is that hopefully this will give people a hint, a clue, as to what the real dangers are with the reinvention of our government. They basically changed our form of government, implementing all of this technology on regional lines that crosses our legal jurisdictional boundaries.
So all of that has to be reversed as well. Wow.
Yes. But to do that, in order to deconstruct the kind of systems that they have installed, you have to understand those systems, because you don't.
Well, it's like a doctor. You can't treat an illness until you know what it is. Right.
It's like a doctor. First, do no harm. Because we're in a mess. I mean, I can't even. I could spend hours and hours talking about this stuff and what a disaster everything is. But they changed our form of government. They implemented a centrally planned economy. They moved to these regional structures that sit above and outside of our view, that we do not elect. We don't elect the people who are making the decisions. So, the young people, they have to understand this. They have to understand this system. because they're going to inherit this country. And so they have to understand how it's really working. The Constitution is nice. I mean, it's our guidelines, but it's the actual implementation of government policy that affects you where you live.
Right. And unfortunately, they've got them their attention focusing on their video games and their phone screens and their Instagrams and all of that, instead of actually realizing that they're being led around by the nose and going down a very bad path. So yeah, well, Vicky, you know, we can only do what we can do. Why? I guess we've gone on for almost an hour here, and I don't want to keep you from getting your other things done today, and I imagine our listeners have things to do too. But why don't we hit one more time your contact information and your website, so that people can go look at this, especially these last two articles you've put up were absolutely incredible. So tell us again about your website and how to contact you.
Okay. My new website is The Technocratic Tyranny, and thetechnocratictyranny.com. And my old website is channelingreality.com. And my email address is eyeswideoopen. Eyeswide don't, I mean, you know, it's eyes wide open, but it has two O's, at channelingreality.com.
Okay. I think that's important.
If you don't get that, you can go to the website and get it, because it's on both websites.
All right. Wonderful. Vicky, I want to thank you for coming and doing this today. It's a very complicated subject, and yet it's simple at the same time. It's complicated in that, you know, they're playing all these chess pieces against us in such a mass that's almost impossible to address each one. And yet it's simple, because the real reason why it's succeeding is most of us are asleep and haven't and refuse to be awake. And so hopefully this will help, at least in some part, to help awaken people to what's going on. So I want to thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. You know what had occurred to me the other day, the way to describe this whole situation is that the globalists are playing 3D chess or 4D chess. Our political leaders are playing checkers, but they're throwing the checkers at each other.
Exactly. Boy, you are absolutely 100% right. Absolutely. Oh. Yeah, and we've been lulled into this. We thought our government was there to protect us from these enemies, and unfortunately, now that we look at it, we see that the enemy is us, and that's very sad. Thanks so much.
True.
Yes, thanks so much, Vicky. I'll be in touch with you again. I sure hope you get some contacts from people that will help to get this information out. I think it's critical. Again, your work is impeccable and absolutely superb. And you write in such a way that, you know, complicated information is easily understood, and I want to thank you for doing that. I don't think I could do it. All righty.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Roy.
Thank you. We'll see you later, Vicky. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, there she goes. I'll tell you what, you know, that lady is an encyclopedia, and there are like hundreds of volumes in that encyclopedia. She has so much information, but I think that what we've talked about today will show you, or at least it should whet your appetite to find out how things are actually working. And they're not working the way that we're told they are. In fact, we're actually part. The Five Eyes is really proof of it. The Five Eyes, which she's mentioned and which I've talked about, being New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Britain, and the United States. Why are there 4 British Commonwealth nations plus the U.S.? The secret is because the U.S. is part of that British Commonwealth or Commonwealth of Nations. That's the reason why. It was surreptitiously, we never really pulled away from it after the revolution. Not that our founders and the people that ran our government weren't aware of what was going on, but this war has been going on for a long time. We had Tories, insiders, all along who wanted to go back to the British Crown and that whole concept of empire. And we've seen it in our government for many, many years. I honestly do believe that Trump is trying to do something about it. I don't believe that anything that he is doing is to help these folks. I think he actually is revealing who and what they are. I'm not certain that he's doing it the way I would do it, but I'm not there. So as I've often said after my trip across the bridge that day where I saw the sign that said, "When there's nowhere else to go, stay." So I'm sticking with Trump at this point. This recent thing that he did with the problems of this caravan coming up, which really is an invasion. I wouldn't call it a caravan. I'd call it an army. Is exactly what I'd call it. He said that the birthright and citizenship thing is going to go away. In other words, no more anchor baby situations. No other nation on earth does that, and we should never have done it. But it was again to help to tear down our republic, because you can't bring people into your society, into your family. You can't bring someone into your family that isn't willing to assimilate to your values. It can't go the other way, or you lose what brought those people in the first place, supposedly, right? Freedom and liberty. Well, it's not really that. It's about social welfare and that kind of thing right now. But at any rate, so why do I say all this? Well, we're a week away from probably the most important midterm election in U.S. history. And don't sit back and think that it's going to be a red wave. Don't take that for granted. We can't do that. Do I trust the Republicans? No, because many of them are really in bed with the leftist, Marxist, Democrats, etc. But what we do need to do is send a loud and clear message that we support Trump. Could he betray us, or could they get rid of him or do something? Yeah, but it's what we have, and it's what we have to work with. And we need to be loud, and we need to make sure that we send that message with no ifs, ands, or buts. So please get out. If you can vote early, do that. There are some places that, of course, allow you to do that, absentee ballots, etc. But don't fail to get out there and make an impact this time. The left, that's the unfortunate thing. The left is always better organized than the right. The evil is always better organized than the just. And the reason for that is scriptural, actually. And it says in the scriptures that the children of darkness are wiser than the children of light. Why? Because the children of light don't sit around thinking about how to do evil all the time. If you're going to think about how to do evil, you have to make plans. And so that's what they do. And they do it all the time, and they're very good at organizing. Don't take for granted that they're going to be put down in this election. Don't take it for granted. Look at Mitt Romney in Utah. He shouldn't even be running for office. I'm ashamed of the people of Utah for even considering that jackass. But he also has many of the election machines. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I'm so glad I'm not actually a citizen of that state anymore. It's just disgusting in so many ways. I like the Utah people by and large, but man, I'll tell you what, they do whatever they're told by and large, and it's really upsetting to me. So anyway, get out and vote. It's very important, as you all know. I don't have to say that. And I'm not sure if I should talk about this or not before I close. I have very strong ties, not to Jews, but to the Israelite tradition. And they call it Judeo-Christian tradition, and there's some truth to that. But more importantly, is the Israelite, not the Israeli. Because the country of Israel really doesn't follow Torah. Most Orthodox Jews know that. Most people that have studied it know it. I'm not going to get into the whys and wherefores and whether that could be a prophetic thing or not. It doesn't matter at this point. What I am saying is this, that the ancient Israelite tradition has some really wonderful things in it. And the language itself does. And a lot of people, I've been into contact with some that have made comments lately about Hebrew is satanic and all this nonsense. What I will say is this. I don't know that Trump is actually pro-Israel. I don't know that that's what it is. I think he's working with what he has. I do see evidence in him of something called the Rechabites. Have you ever heard of that? One of the best places to look at it, you knew I was going to end on a little thing. I say, I don't want to talk about politics or spiritual things in here because I've said all I can. I do get discouraged a lot, and I hope you all understand that. When you see the disaster that is waiting to happen, and the little voice out here that's trying to say something, and then there's always somebody out there with a bucket of water to put your fire out. But by the same token, I do want to say this. Go look up what a Rechabite is. Jeremiah 35, verse 6. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a thing that you have to do. This was a covenant made by the family of Jehonadab, whose father was Rechab, and that's why they call them Rechabites. And basically, they promised not to drink wine and strong drink and other things. Now, there's nothing wrong with wine and strong drink. Don't get me down, arguing about, whether or not you should have that. This was a specific covenant that was made with a specific family for a specific reason, okay? It's not a commandment by any means, shape, or form. I'm not even sure it's a good example, actually, because, there's some evidence that Jesus, of course, drank wine. He almost had to in those days. The pure of the grape thing, it was going to ferment anyway with the temperatures and things like that. But anyway, that's another story. Why do I link Israelites to the Rechabites, who are also the Nazarenes, the Nazarites, right? If you know anything about history, Jesus was supposedly from Nazareth, a Nazarite. There's no place called Nazareth. It was actually a way of living, the Nazarite vow. But at any rate, why do I link this with Trump? Trump doesn't drink. He doesn't use drugs. He doesn't, use tobacco. People will try to say, well, he's a womanizer. Well, unfortunately, there's nothing in the scriptures against that either, if you really understand what it's saying. As a matter of fact, it's indicative of something else entirely. But if you just give him a pass on that one if you don't understand. The point is, he doesn't use alcohol. He doesn't use tobacco. He doesn't use drugs. And I made this comment once about a year and a half ago, I think. Yes, I know he had some surgery on his scalp for his hair, and that's the excuse given for his particular hairstyle. But I'm also suspicious, in a good way, that he is, in fact, following the Rechabite vows. And he has not cut the corner of his beard. You might say, well, he's clean shaven. Well, that's not really what it's about. It's about the hair at the temple. And if you notice, President Trump, it's long. If he were to let his hair down, you would have long hair right here, but he tucks it behind his ear, supposedly to protect probably the scars from the scalp surgery. But when I combine everything else that's going on here, I'm almost looking at this as that, he really does exemplify a man who is trying his very best to do the right thing against incredible odds. So let's give him a chance. What else have we got to lose? All right. That's it for today. Thanks for coming. Keep your eyes on the horizon, your ears to the ground. Keep your situational awareness on high. Remember, I read to you this morning what actor James Cromwell said. There will be blood in the streets if Trump isn't stopped. And he's not saying Trump's going to cause it. They're going to cause the fighting, okay? And we're hearing that across the board. They have these little things like, the bombing suspect, the mail bomb suspect, and the shooting in the synagogue, and these things to blame the right wings. But there's no real proof that these people are, in fact, what they say they are, what the news media and the government is saying they are. So just be aware there's a lot of deception out there. This is the age of deception. So keep your situational awareness on high. I don't want anybody getting hurt. Prep, pray, stay out of the way. Financial things are having a problem. They're trying to crash the stock market to hurt Trump on that and his agenda on that side, etc. I don't anticipate, unlike some other YouTube commentators say. I'm not a financial guy, but I don't see them taking it out completely, but enough to scare, because they bet on it both going up and down, so there's some other issues there that I wonder about. But at any rate, I don't want to get involved in that other than to say that, just get ready. And then finally, God bless you. God bless the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America and the Second American Revolution. And that's really what we're about, folks, just like my title says there. Did the revolution really free us from the British? I think we're seeing proof that it didn't, that in the long run, their perseverance and patience actually won out in the end, and we have to realize that we have to take it back, okay? We can do it peacefully, but it needs to be taken back. So I ask God to send President Trump the spirit of discernment, that it may descend upon him as the dews from heaven, that he may know the difference between the right and the wrong, and have the courage to do the right thing. Alrighty, I didn't get to chat today, and I apologize, but I wanted to get that information out. Please go to Vicky's website. You can go to either one that she mentioned, channelingreality.com, or her new one, thetechnocratictyranny.com. And if you have any way of helping her get that information out, or I should say, letting her help you to grow and to give this information out in large numbers to large numbers of people, please take advantage of that, because she is a wealth of information and will give you an understanding that you won't get very many other places. So with that, I want to again thank you. I was going to play a little break today, but of course we kind of ran out of time, so I don't have a chance to do that. I did a short Venice tour too, which will be the last one, but I'm also going to have one out on a Japan tour. It's just actually in Tokyo and up near Yokota Air Force Base. And I'll also have one on the Bahamas and some other little short deals like that I think you might find interesting. Verona, Italy, for instance, where there's an arena very similar to the Colosseum in Rome, not as big, but very similar. Just some cool things like that. So we'll do that. And I do plan on doing some more, of a variety of things, not just the political and spiritual commentary, because I really do think that we've outlined what the enemy is doing to us and our reticence in fighting back, that we're not doing it the way we need to, nor as energetically as we should. But there's only so many scenarios that you can talk about, and I really think we've been beating the horse for a long time now. And if people aren't awake at this point, even though the fine points of all these pieces of information are important, we should know by now that we're under a major attack, and we need to do something to turn the tide. And I'm hoping that the American people, that I've misjudged them, and that in fact they are ready to make this effort to turn this tide. But we're going to see. So show me that you are on November 6th, okay? Get out there and let's show them that we're serious, and we're done with the traitors in our government, and they need to go away. And with that, till next time.